good at. And my class that I struggled with the most was math. Okay? So math was my least favorite topic in school, but it's the one that I worked the hardest at because I listened, and it's the one that I use every single day. So that's a good thing to remember. Again, it's back to the listening to your teachers, your parents, and the things that are hard for you to do in school are the things you want to do the most. Those are the things you want to get better at, because for me, that's the thing that I use every single day. Does that make sense? Oh, meteorology is the study of weather. It's the study of weather within our atmosphere. And we study weather because there's actually, I say in our atmosphere, because there's space weather also. But that's another topic. But the study of weather within our atmosphere is called meteorology. And meteorology is science, and it's also tons of math. So if you guys like math, or you're pretty good at math, and you like science like I do, I think you guys would enjoy continuing to learn about that. Now, do you guys have any questions for me about meteorology, about weather? And Wendy, I'll let you pick somebody out, and then they can ask the question, and you'll probably need to repeat it for me. Okay, I said.
If you were in a hurricane, would it be worse in the I part or the turning part of the hurricane?
Well, Seth, that's a great question, buddy. And the answer is it would be worse in the turning part. Because the eye of a hurricane is calm. There's no storminess in the eye. It's usually blue skies. It's sunny. It's clear. There's no rain. It's not windy. But in the turning part of the hurricane, or what we call the eye wall of a hurricane, that's where there's rain, heavy rain, flooding rain. There's very strong winds, and in the eye wall of a hurricane is usually where we find tornadoes. So the turning part of the hurricane is the absolute worst place to be. The eye of the hurricane is the best place to be. Okay, hi bud.
Which one's more powerful, a tornado or a hurricane?
That's a very good question. So, you first of all, now tell me, is your name Colt?
Colt, C-O-L-T.
Okay, Colt. So Colt, the first question that you have to answer for me is, what's your definition of more powerful? What's your definition of powerful? Because I say that, now let me tell you this. So, my question to all of you is, what is more powerful, a hurricane or a tornado? Okay, so here's the difference between the two. And you guys answer this. What's the most violent storm on Earth? The most violent storm on Earth, and Colt, I'm going to answer your question this way. The most violent storm on Earth is a tornado. And here's the reason why. Tornadoes can have winds of maybe 250 to 300 miles an hour or stronger. That's a tornado. Hurricanes, the strongest of the strongest hurricanes will have winds of maybe 200 miles an hour, maybe. So what's faster, 300 or 200? 300, right? So tornadoes have stronger winds, but tornadoes are, of course, much smaller. So a tornado, the biggest tornado, may be, maybe the size of, I don't know how big your school is, but a tornado may be as big as like your school and all of the property that your school sits on. That's a very, very, very large tornado. A very, very large hurricane could be the size of the state of Texas. So hurricanes are much bigger, but the winds aren't as strong. Tornadoes are much smaller, but the winds are considerably faster. So does that answer your question, Colt? Okay. So that should answer your question and also tell you a little bit about the difference between the two, and also tell you a little bit about why one is more violent than the other, but one is bigger than the other too. Okay?
This is Taylor.
Taylor, okay. That's a good question, Taylor. So tornadoes can last, some tornadoes only last for seconds. Some tornadoes can last maybe up to, the longest they'll last, it could be a few seconds. They touch down, then they fall apart. Some tornadoes can last an hour or maybe even two. That's probably at the longest, is maybe a couple of hours. Now, hurricanes can last for days. Some of them can last for 7, maybe 10 days. So, does that kind of help you? Does that answer your question and give you a little bit more information too? Oh, how far can a tornado travel? Well, it depends on how long they last. But some tornadoes can travel for, let me see, I'm sitting right in front of my computer. That's a good question. I want to see the longest duration of a tornado. I want to say maybe 100 miles. Here's one that the longest tornado lasted, it was on the ground for 219 miles. And it was on the ground for 3.5 hours. Yeah. And that tornado, interestingly enough, happened not too far from where I grew up in southern Illinois, but long before I was born in 1925. So there you go. Thank you, Taylor. Absolutely.
How do you know where the weather is going? How do you know where the weather is going?
Madison, thank you very much. That's a good question. So, we know where the weather is going by using different tools to keep track of it. And one of those tools that we use is radar. And radar is a way that we track thunderstorms. So, radar helps us see where the storm is now, and it allows us also to determine and track where it's going to go. Another thing that we use to track the weather, the other thing that we do is satellites. Satellites are these cameras that are up in space, and it allows us to look down on the earth and see where storms are right now. And it allows us to then determine where they're going to go. So 2 things help us track the weather, radars and satellites. And both of those things are available to us on computers. So before computers were available, it was almost impossible for us to figure out where schools were and where they were going. But now, because we have computers, able to do all of that. Okay?
Thank you. One of my kids had asked about how many satellites are in space that you use.
Well, the U.S. government, and we're not going to talk about the ones the military has because it's hard to determine exactly how many are there. But I believe right now there's 4 different satellites that the U.S. government has that are available to us in the public sector to use. And then many countries, not all, but many countries have their own weather satellites up there also. And most countries share that weather data with one another. So it could be a total of maybe a dozen different satellites spread out amongst, maybe a handful of different countries. We all share similar type of data.
How many more questions do you have? We have a couple more. This is Sean.
Hi, Sean.
Speak up nice and loud, Sean, so you can hear. Stage fright. Is there?
That's a good.
Did you hear it?
Yeah, is there a way to stop storms from coming? And the answer is, as of today, no. And I hope there's not a way to stop storms from coming. And the reason why is, number one, Mother Nature is a lot smarter than we are, us human beings. And weather occurs across the globe because it's a way of balancing the heat. How do I say this to first graders? It's a way of the Earth balancing the uneven it's a way of the Earth trying to balance the temperature differences across the globe. And so that's why weather occurs, that's how it develops, is because the sun heats the uneven surfaces of the Earth at different rates. And that different heating rate causes weather and clouds to develop. So I'm afraid if we as humans disrupted that natural cycle of how the Earth balances the heat, I'm afraid if we disrupted that natural cycle, we may create even bigger problems. So right now, we're not able to do it, and I know people are trying to figure it out. I hope that they don't succeed.
All right. Is there one more question?
Yeah.
Ethan? Can you introduce yourself? This is Ethan.
Hi, Ethan. Well, that's a great question, Ethan. And we're able to predict the weather today. We can predict 7 days in advance today as accurately as we could predict 3 days in advance, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So how far in advance can we do it? Well, it depends on how accurate we want us to be. So I'm going to get us to be accurate. So we can predict it with about 98% accuracy 24 hours in advance. Beyond 24 hours, or 48, 72 hours, it then becomes a little less accurate. Does that answer your question? Okay, well, thank you, buddy. Wendy, do you guys have questions?
Anybody else have a question? I think we're good, Pete. Thank you so much for visiting with us this morning. We're super excited to finally get to talk to you. We've been anticipating this for quite a while now. So.
Well, you're more than welcome. It was a lot of fun. It was great seeing you guys.